Hello and welcome to Perfectly Paranormal, episode 32. My name's Annaschmidt and I'm here every week to share with you true paranormal encounters and information about devils, demons and dark energy beings that no one else talks about. And today we're looking in depth at possession. And not the head-spinning, vomiting nails walking across the ceiling type of possession, which has been imprinted into our minds by what you see in the movies. But possession in reality, and how demonic beings can enhance negative behaviours, mental or emotional issues, or sometimes trauma which is already within us, and why people act and react the way that they do. So to get us started, I'm going to outline some information for you first today, and then we'll delve into the real-life experiences of my clients who have had different levels of possession. Generally, I don't like using the term possession because it instantly invokes fear in people. And then the word exorcism comes to mind, which is another term that just simply invokes fear, anxiety, paranoia in people. But I'm using the word possession here today because people widely understand it as the human mind and body being overtaken by demonic level beings. Possession occurs when a mentally or emotionally vulnerable person's mind and body have been infiltrated by demonic level energy beings for the purpose of feeding off that person's energy and manipulating their thoughts and behaviours to constantly create more and more emotional food for these invading energy beings. Note that there is always more than one of these beings present, whether they're dark or demonic level beings. They very rarely travel alone. I used to think that it was safety in numbers, but what I think it is now, as I observe them through the work I do, is that they travel in groups because they're picking other beings that are similar to them who may vibrate at that same frequency. And they just simply travel together looking for the same food source, whether it's a group looking for hatred or a group looking for resentment or fear or paranoia. There's a million different types of emotional imprints that these energy beings feed off. But there are particular ones that have a super low frequency, and they are a topic for another episode. So when you hear me say a vulnerable person, what do I mean by that? People ask me that all the time. Everyone has a trigger within them, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, or spiritually, depending on the specific trigger area for each individual person. Now, the trigger may be a single or repeated trauma or a large build-up of negative emotions, a strong desire or want, or an all-consuming addiction. The vulnerability can be consciously invoked or in the subconscious mind hidden by, for example, a deep sense of shame, guilt or grief, as in the following example of a woman's experience in an Australian movie called The Babadook. Now in this movie, Amelia experiences the loss of her husband in a car crash. And she held her devastating grief within herself for 7 years. Now, she didn't seek medical or mental health care. She just simply went about her life as normally as she could. Now, this massive build-up of grief attracted a demonic being that caused havoc and turmoil in her and her son's life. Now, I don't want to be a spoiler. If you want to watch the movie, just keep in mind that not everyone who experiences grief or other emotional traumas will attract demonic feeders. There are many components to a person's vulnerability and what actually attracts these beings in the first place. Now, some people who experience possession may be vulnerable because of long-term trauma and this build-up of low vibrational emotions, as I've just mentioned, or they could go looking for fulfillment in spiritual advancement through what I now call dangerous practices, which through free will, they willingly open up their energy and attract energy beings that are in the vicinity into that person's energy field. They can then infiltrate their physical body, their organs, their chakras, their meridian lines, and their energy field, depending on the frequency that these beings are looking for or the person's particular vulnerability. It's really complex when you talk about possession, but I always find that there is something that has triggered the person to attract these very heavy, dense energy beings. So in the following information, I have outlined 3 different stages of possession to give you some idea of how these beings work. So we're going to start with the attracting of the demonic beings, and we're going to work through to looking at full possession. These are some changes I have witnessed within my clients that have signified there was some level of possession present. So level 1, we're looking at what I call the testing phase. This is where the demonic beings have been attracted to the person for a particular reason, and they hang around. They're testing the ground. They're seeing how vulnerable you are and if you're going to suit their needs. Quite often they'll observe you for quite a long period of time, and they'll gauge your level of mental and emotional stability, your level of psychic or spiritual openness or vulnerability. Now, at the second level, we're looking at what I call destabilizing. This is the wearing down of the person's mind, body, and spirit through activating the person's triggers or causing sleep deprivation, eating issues, behavioral issues, heightened addiction issues. Whatever it is within the person, which is their trigger. These beings are going to enhance that to weaken the person's energy, to weaken their life force. And quite often, people will notice that they're waking up and they've got strange bruises on their body, or they've got scratches that weren't there the night before, and there was no way that they could have been caused by themselves. They've done all the debunking. I actually worked with a client who was at this level. She was at a friend's place one night watching television, and while she was sitting there were scratches that were developing on her forearms. And look, she's just sitting there. She wasn't even really aware of it. She was out of her body, as I call it. People who aren't grounded, their energy is scattered and they're not actually within their physical body. And her friend is looking at her arms as these scratches are appearing. And it totally freaked her out. And when I worked with this client, I was able to determine that she'd been doing a lot of astral travel work, a lot of spiritual work. And while she was out of her body, the demonic beings had actually corded into her, they'd connected into her because of her curiosity about the unknown. She was extremely vulnerable mentally, and she was seeing a psychologist who was helping. She was seeing her doctor, but she needed the energetic aspect to help bring her back into her body, remove the triggers that were attracting these paranormal beings, and then to remove the beings themselves. And within a week of working with that young lady, there was no more scratches appearing on her body. And she was more settled, she was more focused, she was getting on better with her family. Her boss told her, he said, "Look, I don't know where you've been for the last 6 months, but you're back now." Quite often people can sense energetic changes in others, but they can't quite put their finger on it, or they don't want to believe that it is something non-tangible. Now, the third level of possession is what I call infestation. This is where the demonic beings have fully moved into the person. They're not corded to the person, as they can sometimes be in the first and the second levels. This is where they are fully within the person. It can be their mind, it can be their physical body, their organs, their chakras, their meridian lines, and their energy field, like I had with one of my clients, which is going to be a story in a future episode. What I estimate as around 70% control of the person on a constant daily basis. They control the person's thoughts, their behaviours, their actions, and their reactions. The person's soul is still present in their body, but because of the testing phase and the destabilising phase, their energy's been weakened, their life force has been weakened, their free will is compromised, and their mind and body feels energetically altered, mental and emotional disruption. Sometimes they can even have possible changes in their facial features. They can have confusion, sleep issues, eating issues. It just becomes more and more difficult to live a normal life. Now, these people are being starved of life. Their life essence is simply draining away, and the negative thoughts are imprinted into their minds that the only way out is by taking their life. Now, this is a personal comment that I want to make. I have had, because of the work I do and because of my level of paranormal addiction, I have had many, many demonic beings attempt to take me into and past level 2. Because my paranormal addiction is my weakness. It is my trigger in their eyes because they know that I am fascinated by them. So in a way, the work I do is wonderful because it helps people and their homes and the land, but it's actually quite traumatizing for my body. But there's a big but here. I am really, really strong mentally and emotionally, and I'm always putting up a fight. And I know a lot of the signs and symptoms. So what I'm basically trying to say is that these demonic level beings lose interest in the strong people. We are simply a waste of their energy, and they will just go looking for easier targets. So when you stand your ground, and I don't mean being rude, because being disrespectful will get you a backlash from them, but when you are respectful and you stand your ground and you know what some of the signs and symptoms are, you can see your doctor, you can see your mental health professional, you can see an energy clearer, you can cover the problem in a holistic way. Now, I've put together the main signs of possession that I have witnessed in my clients, and these show some of the types of triggers which can elevate demonic beings' control within people. Now, this isn't a complete list. There's no book written about this topic. All of the following signs and symptoms could have medical or a mental health cause. So please see your doctor first before assuming that your problem has an energetic cause. Now, sometimes people can exhibit extreme changes in their cognitive, emotional, and physical behaviours, and it can be towards themselves or others. Now, they may experience erratic sleep patterns, hellish nightmares, night terrors, or extreme insomnia. Now, some people experience extreme changes in their eating patterns. I have seen clients that have been gorging themselves uncontrollably and they just don't know why. Or, at the other end of the scale, people are starving themselves. Now, it can seem to them that they're doing it by choice. Or some clients have actually said to me that they can't stand the taste or the feel of food in their mouths. They don't feel that they can swallow the food. Now, you're going to hear about this in one of the upcoming stories in this episode. Now, some people can experience extreme erratic paranoia. They can be manically muttering to themselves day and night, and this can really scare their friends and family. And this is where I'll say to people, you've got to step in. There's got to be an intervention. If you are concerned about a friend or a family member, please take them to their doctor. Get them to see a mental health professional. Now, if a person has a predisposition towards hostility and violence, some demonic beings, when they get within people who have that trigger, now the trigger can be hidden or it can be outwardly known. They can thrive on instigating violence within that person outwardly towards others, or by manipulating the host into self-harming behaviours. Now, in contrast, certain types of demonic energy beings will influence their host to become extremely introverted or sometimes even egocentric, feeding off the host person's negative thoughts, their extreme emotions, their low self-esteem, and their low self-worth. Now, they are just some of the examples of what I have seen within my clients. Now, people who experience differing levels of possession can live quite normally. They can live very normal lives. Sometimes you just can't pick it. Now, these demonic level beings are very sneaky. Most people aren't as energetically sensitive as myself. I was actually with a lady one day. This is a little short story. I was with a lady that I just met through another client, and I met her to talk about a house clearing. And she wanted to meet at a cafe, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. I don't go out very often. I'd made sure I'd memorised her name because I do forget people's names sometimes. That is just one of my little quirks. And I memorised her name and I said it all the way as I was driving to meet this client. I sat down with her, instantly forgot her name. As soon as I looked her in the eyes seemed to be a connection point. As soon as I look at the person, I'm picking up on what is within them. Now, I don't want to pick up on what is within them. It's their stuff. But I don't seem to be able to help it. It's like the dark or demonic beings have been cloaked within the person, and the person just goes about their life, and they just assume that they're not getting enough sleep and they're grumpy because, there's issues with the family or their job, or they're just not happy in life. But these paranormal beings are working away in the background. They're poking and prodding the person. They're manipulating their thoughts, making them create this energetic food. It's like a really vicious cycle. And I'm going to share a couple of accounts of the client experiences. Now, each client experienced sudden extreme behavioural changes towards themselves or others, which medication did not help control. The following case study is an example of what I call an egocentric type of possession, and I have called this experience Read My Palm. I used to do palm readings, I used to do numerology readings, and I was at a local medieval festival one day. And I was sitting at the front table when this young man approached. Now, he came and he stood there very slowly looking over the posters of each reader. Now, I watched him as he looked at each image and then the readers, making up his mind as to whom he would see. He stopped at my picture, looked up and stared at me. And he just stared and stared until I spoke. And I very confidently asked him if he would like to come and take a seat. Now, he stood calmly assessing me, and he just silently moved forward to sit at my table. Now, as this man moved past me to go to the table, there was something odd about him. Like my spidey senses, my psychic awareness was starting to ping. But this young man had something that I hadn't seen before. Only way that I can describe it. As he moved past me, I felt a shift within him. It's hard to explain to people what that means, is that I felt a change in his energy. It was quite unusual. This was going to be an interesting palm reading. Now, when this young man sat down, there was a defined air of arrogance about him. He must have been around 22 to 25 years old, and there was just that something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Now, he very rudely sat there observing me through his reflective sunglasses. And I just sat there. I thought, right, I'm not going to deal with you until you take your sunglasses off. There was a very long pause, and I just sat there looking back at him. I was just waiting for him to take his glasses off. Because as I mentioned earlier in this episode, the eyes tell a lot about people. Now, the smirk on his face said that he knew what I was waiting for, and he wasn't ready to concede yet. So I just continued to wait. I was not going to be bullied by whatever was within this young man. Now, finally, he took his glasses off. Oh my gosh, it was as if he was doing it in slow motion like you see in the movies. It was really very strange. Like, he was a seriously odd young man. And behind his eyes, I could see and feel a dark presence. Now, it was very controlling and very hateful. And it wouldn't have liked me at all, because these demonic beings, they can sense an energy worker. I don't know how to explain that. I'm actually going to do an episode on that at some stage. Now, I very slowly and carefully read his palm and chose my words even more carefully as I assessed the lines and the markings on his right palm. Now, this man, he talked very openly of self-harm, and he proudly showed me the scars on his left arm, as if they were trophies. Now, on one hand, he was showing me these trophies, but he also told me of the menacing energy being that was controlling him. And because he said that, I then acknowledged feeling its unsettling presence. Now, he wanted it gone from his life, as it was ruining his relationship with his family and his girlfriend. She was frightened of his erratic and violent behaviours, which were increasing in intensity, and she said that she may soon just leave because she was in fear of her life. Now, after I'd finished reading this young man's palm, he wrote down his phone number to organise an energy clearing with me, and then he quickly left with his girlfriend by his side. Now, I rang that number within the next couple of days, only to find that the phone number he'd written down was incorrect. Now, was this an accident, or had the demonic being or beings influenced him to write down the wrong number to stop the energetic clearing from happening? I guess I will never know. Now, coming up in episode 37, which is a little way down the track, I'm going to be sharing demonic attachment to spiritual people and why this happens, and a remarkable story of a woman who became possessed with the most demonic beings that I've ever seen in one person, and what I did to help her. Now, for those who want to understand possessive manipulation, the following case study highlights the symptoms that led John and Kim to seek alternative help in their dire situation. And I've called this case study Possessive Behaviours with Dark Intent. Now, a couple approached me because John's partner was exhibiting erratic behaviours and other harmful symptoms which were being treated medically and psychologically. And there'd been some improvement, but they weren't getting the results that they wanted. Now, Kim was highly sceptical of energy work, but as a last resort, she and John decided to try an alternative approach. Kim, when herself, was kind, gentle and super funny. always cracking a joke, and everybody loved her humour. And she was a very busy woman who was highly passionate about her work. And when at home, she enjoyed cooking and was highly creative in the kitchen. She'd spend hours and hours whizzing up gourmet treats for John and herself to share, and they really enjoyed each other's company. Now, her sleep patterns had never been great, and she'd get around 4 to 6 hours solid sleep a night, and then bounce out of bed each day, ready for her daily routine. Now, Kim took a turn for the worst approximately 3 months ago. She started to become sullen and reactive, both verbally and emotionally. And Kim would lash out verbally in abusive ways, not her usual gentle, humorous approach to communication. And this was deeply worrying John. As I stated above, Kim loved food. She loved cooking. She just loved everything about creating delicious meals. But now she found that she had lost all will to eat. She was throwing up the simplest of foods and continued to lose weight. She just simply couldn't keep food in her body. Her face started to take on the look of starvation, with her cheekbones showing more and more each day. Now, when John looked at Kim, he told me she just didn't look herself. Her facial features differed from normal, and she was distant energetically, as only sort of a close partner could tell. I was given permission to do an energetic clearing for Kim, and what I found didn't surprise me at all. She had multiple dark and demonic level beings present in her physical body, within her organs, within her chakras and her meridian lines, also in her energy field, and they were disrupting every aspect of Kim. Her thinking, her eating, her sleeping, her walking, her behaviours. They really had a solid grip on Kim. Now, the 4 dark energy beings were attached to the emotions of depression, overwhelm, sorrow, worthless, and paranoia. Now, these were in her energy field, and John remembered a particular event that may have triggered these emotions in Kim, because her behaviour started to change at around that time. And the 6 demonic level beings that were present, they were within Kim's physical body, organs, her heart and crown chakra, some of her meridian lines, and also her energy field. They were attached to massive build-ups of sadness, grief, depression, anxiety, paranoia, resentment, hostility. These energy beings, the demonic level ones, really attach to emotions of hatred, hostility, rage, anger, resentment. They carry such a low vibration that you get these groups of demonic level beings getting within people's energy bodies, and they just feel mentally, emotionally, and physically unwell. They're being attacked on all levels. Now, this level of demonic energy affected me quite harshly as well when I was doing Kim's clearing work. As soon as I was given permission to do the assessment and the clearing, I felt demonic disapproval. My usual dark energy signs and symptoms started to appear. The brain fog, the distraction, the feeling wobbly in the mind, the extreme tiredness, and I get walking difficulties. My feet felt like I was wearing moon boots. Like my energy was seriously disrupted. Now, I pushed through the symptoms and I completed the clearing, which took approximately 12 hours. These demonic beings will always transfer to the energy worker doing the clearing. Not a lot of energy workers will admit that or want to even think about it. Demonic beings will not simply leave a host. They will transfer. And then if someone knows how to deal with them, like I've worked out ways to negotiate's probably not a good word, but I worked out ways to release them where they will simply just go back out into the environment. Now, this is the best part of this story. Kim's symptoms started to diminish slowly over the next week. John said she was sleeping better the very first night after the energy clearing. Her humour and her witty retorts began to return. There were some bouts of nausea, sort of reactive behaviours and actions that were still occurring. And I explained to John that it can take the mind and the body time for everything to settle and readjust back to who you are. I call it going through a detox. Your body and your mind, like for Kim, she had been putting up with these symptoms for probably about 3 months. Now these demonic beings had been removed. She needed to retrain her brain into thinking and reacting the way that she used to before these beings were present. And that can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks to 6 months for some people, for them to fully retrain their brains away from the paranormal, away from those reactive behaviours or whatever their triggers were at that time, that they'd started to become habits. Now, about 3 weeks later, Kim's sleep had improved immensely. It was almost back to normal. And she felt alive like never before. All aspects of life were looking hopeful again. And she had a skip in her step. And for the first time in 3 months, John and Kim could see a positive, happy future together. Now, this next case study tells of possession connected to items. Now, this I haven't come across very often at all. But this story is about a rather unusual collection of books that triggered possession within a young man. Now, books, you say, how can they be harmful? You shall see. Now, I've called this story the Satanic Book Collection. Now, Jeff rang to book an energetic clearing for himself. He said he was having long-term sleep issues and nightmares that were straight from hell. He was experiencing erratic behaviours which frightened his partner and his pets, and his doctor didn't seem to be able to fix the problem. Now, as we chatted, I jotted down some notes, and in my mind, I saw a large bookshelf full of very dark, ominous-looking books. And I casually asked Jeff if he had an interesting book collection, and he confirmed his proud ownership of an extensive library of satanic books. Now, I talked to him about how the energy emanating from these books was similar to what I could feel coming from within his energy field, and that there was possibly a connection between the two. Now, Jeff got really irate, like he blew up on the other end of the phone, and it was a total change in his personality at the mention of these books. It was almost like he was being controlled by the vibration that was emanating from them, being controlled by the demonic beings that would have been attached to these books, because seriously, it is the topic that they are about. There are going to be multiple demonic beings attached to a satanic book collection. Now, they were manipulating Jeff, and Jeff got very irate and he yelled at me down the phone like multiple times how he needed the books and how they kept him going and they were his life, and there was no way in hell that he was going to be giving them up. And then he just simply slammed the phone down. Now, I was a little bit shaken up, as you can probably imagine. After talking with Jeff, I had to go for a walk outside. I needed to ground myself. And as I was talking with Jeff, or as Jeff was yelling at me, I should say, I could hear a type of satanic projection or satanic whispering that was coming from those books. And how the energy beings did not want me talking to Jeff. So they're the ones that instigated in him this level of aggravation and the way that he slammed the phone down. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually broke the phone. Now, Jeff and I texted a few times over the coming weeks. When he'd calmed down, he did apologise for his behaviour because it wasn't him. It simply wasn't him. They were provoking him. That would cut the call. That would finish our communication. I'm not saying Jeff isn't in the wrong, but part of it was that he was being manipulated by these beings because they know they can do it. They know he has a connection to those books. So on some level, this is a type of possession. They are possessing him. He wants the books. It is like a codependency. He said to me that he'd spent $3,000 on this collection of books that had taken him 10 years to collect them, and that there was no way that he was going to be getting rid of them. So that was simply that. His situation wouldn't change unless he wanted it to change. He had to consciously make the choice to get rid of those books. Now, I've got a question from Kerry in the US, and she asks, how do you know demonic beings have transferred to you? So she's talking about when I do the energy clearings. How do I know that they've transferred from the client to myself? Now, over the years, I have built up a really detailed understanding and awareness of my own personal energetic changes and how these demonic beings work. Everything that I share with you in this podcast, through my YouTube channel or through the book that I've written called The Darkness Around Us, it is all 100% information that I've learnt through my experiences. And these beings, I can instantly feel when they're in people. I know when they're transferring from a client to myself. Because when I tune into a client to do an energetic clearing, I am creating a cording attachment, as I call it, an energy cord. It connects myself to the client's energy field. And then I'm able to talk to their higher self and to do the clearing work. And when I'm finished the clearing, then the cord is severed. It's disconnected. We're no longer connected. But when I'm connected to a client, these dark and demonic beings can come through this cording. It's like a super highway for these energy beings. And quite often they'll come to people like myself who do the energy clearing work because they think of us as a threat. Quite often what I sense is my energy will change. I will maybe feel tired, or I feel angry, or I feel sad. Sadness is one that I pick up quite a lot. There can be tingly feelings, prickly feelings. My emotions, like I just mentioned, can become quite abruptly changed. And I get what I call the mind wobbles, or I get brain fog, and I just can't focus. And sometimes, this is really funny, I can feel poking and prodding in my legs. It's really, really interesting. It's hard to explain what I feel. I'm just so used to it now. Now, in the early days, I would feel like my heart was being squeezed, or I would see horrible visions in my mind. This is some of the ploys, some of the tricks that they will use to stop me from connecting to a client or to frighten me away from doing a job. But these symptoms, these things just don't upset me anymore. Now, after I'd finished doing Kim's clearing, I simply felt like I had run a marathon. I was exhausted. I spent the rest of that day and the next 2 days just relaxing, drinking plenty of water, and I would eat high-protein meals to help replenish my energy. Now, 2 of the demonic beings that were released from Kim tried to hide in my house. But I found them because wherever they go, they leave an energetic imprint. And people who are sensitive to energy like myself, I can walk past a room or walk into a room and it's like, something here. And I also get quite hyperactive around demonic level beings, is that my speech will speed up, my thoughts will speed up. I quite often get heart palpitations. So I've learned these symptoms over the years to be signs of energy beings in a location. And just one last thing that I want to say before we finish up for today. I always strongly suggest clients see their doctors and a mental health professional for ongoing care, as the energy clearing work that I do removes the current blockages, the energetic blockages, and the paranormal influences. But paranormal beings can return if the initial issue that drew them there to the person in the first place. See the counsellors, see the mental health workers, because they can help you get to the core of the issue that caused that problem in the first place. Remove the problem, the paranormals, as I call them, will simply just move on. If you don't have their food source there that they want, they're not interested in you. So in episode 33, we are talking tattoos and piercings and how our negative or traumatized mind or emotional state when getting this body art can sometimes invite paranormal attachment, and how these detrimental energetic hitchhikers can then affect our mind functioning, our mental health, and our reactions. So thank you for joining me today. And don't forget, if you want to share a paranormal experience just with myself, or you would like me to share one of your experiences through my podcast, you can do a voice recording, or you can write out your experience and I will read it exactly as you have written. Email me at spiritualbeing44@gmail.com. And for information on paranormal house clearing, you can visit my website, Spiritual Being. You will find the address in the description box. And I look forward to sharing this spooky space again with you next week. And remember, life is perfectly paranormal.